Hi guys!
Hello everyone!
Welcome to Metien Vlogs. This is Metrin and this is my husband,
Adrian.
We live here in France and I'm originally from Kenya. I came here to join my husband after we got married. So in this video, I'm going to tell you my experience, the good and the bad things of living here in France since I relocated, especially because I've been here for about 4-5 months, so I'm pretty new to the whole experience, and I believe it's important for you to know these things before you relocate here to France. So there's going to be the good things, the bad things, and the good and bad things depending on the perspective in which you look at it. This is my personal experience. It may vary from other people who've relocated here in France, but I hope that it is helpful either way. I'll start with the good things. First of all, France is a developed country, so you have to enjoy a lot of things. Like, we have a very good transport system. The buses, the trains, the trams, you will not be struggling like in developed countries where you have a lot of chaos when it comes to the transport industry. The fare is standard. There's nothing like the season or there's nothing like the weather determining how much fare you have to pay. A ticket is a certain amount of money in different cities. So maybe in Paris it's different, in Bordeaux it's different, but either way it's the same for every person. The roads are very developed. Like, if we have issues with the road, like potholes and everything, the government is always taking care of it. The next thing is the recreational facilities like parks. We have plenty of those, and usually there are rules that in every city there has to be a particular number of parks, or in every estate there has to be a particular number of parks, so you are able to exercise freely, you are able to go for a jog, or just all those things that you need to have a healthy life.
Yes, and to breathe fresh air. Exactly.
The security is very good in most of the cities, but it actually depends on the city you live in. We have some cities like Paris. The security is good, but you may encounter pickpockets, you may encounter people who like steal here and there. But trust me, it is not as bad as other places. For example, for me, it's not as bad as in Kenya. You don't walk around worried someone will rob you or will grab something. It's a rare occasion. And in cities that are very small, it's almost impossible to hear such things as someone was pickpocketed or, like I have never personally had such an experience living here in France. Electricity is there 24/7, 365. I can say like you will not have to get worried at all about the electricity has gone unless you haven't paid for the
charges.
So if you pay for the charges, you are guaranteed that electricity will be there 24/7. And electricity is provided by geothermal and solar and
nuclear. Solar, nuclear, geothermal, maybe not. And that's all.
So there are different modes of electricity, and I think it varies depending on where you're living and all those things, but you are assured that electricity is there most of the time. Usually, if they have to cut off the electricity because of constructions, they will give you a notice, or it will not go for a long time, maybe like 15 minutes. But since I relocated here in France, I've experienced that once for the many months that I've been here. So I can't really say it's a bad thing. For the people, it's comme ci, comme ça. I'll say that the people are friendly, but they really expect you to know their language and to speak to them in their language. However, this culture is not like an African culture where people embrace each other, like people are very, close. People here mind their business. Like, you live in a neighborhood where you don't talk to your neighbor at all. You say hi when you meet, but you don't know their names, you don't know how many children or whatever. Everyone lives their private life. So it's a good and it's a bad thing depending on how you look at it and depending on your character. So on matters of racism, I have personally never experienced any racial discrimination directly. I don't know, maybe it exists when it comes to employment opportunity, or when it comes to, things that are not directly on my face. Like, I have never met someone who tells me you're black or you're Asian or something like that. And in fact, there are many black French people living here in France, from French black countries and islands. So pretty much people are friendly. But I don't have solid information on this, because I have friends who tell me they've experienced segregation when it comes to employment opportunities, where people didn't think they can speak good French, or people just didn't give they felt like they were discriminated because of their color or their race. However, I cannot personally comment on this. On matters good and bad, like the things that it depends on how you look at it, I'll start with accommodation. First of all, the accommodation can be very stressful because you will not get accommodation here in France if you don't have a stable job.
Yes.
And if you are working as a part-time, or for you to get a stable job, I mean, you have to get
So, full-time job, your salary is strong, you are stable in your life, you pay income tax, and that's all.
That's all, yeah. Yeah, so if you just have a job where you're just working as part-time, or you don't have a contract, no one will give you a house to live in for rental or for any other thing. And it's a very stressful matter because not everyone has the privilege of getting a contract to work here in France. And even if you do, your salary may not be up to the scale that they want. So like if your salary is up to a particular amount, you'll get these types of houses.
Yeah.
And if it's less than that, they will not allow you to live in a particular type of house.
Yes. But don't forget, solutions exist.
Yes.
Like there are organizations to help you, there are government to help you too.
Yes, like for example, if you're a single mother here, or if you are maybe a widow or something like that, they have privileges where they have it's called social houses.
Yeah, social houses.
Yes, where they consider only people who maybe they can't reach this salary range and they have a child and they're single mothers or they're widowed and stuff like that. But if you're a normal person, maybe a normal couple, you have a salary, it doesn't get to this range, it's very difficult for you to get certain amounts of certain types of houses. For the prices, it varies on the city that you live in. For example, Paris is very expensive. You will have to pay for a lot of money for a very small space for you to live in. And the cities like here, Bordeaux, it's not very expensive like Paris, but it's expensive compared to other places. And also, the accommodation here is not easy to find. Like many people complain, coming to live in Bordeaux mostly complain about accommodation and where to live and stuff like that.
Yes.
And the houses, my personal preference, I think I prefer the German system of houses. I feel like here in France it's very restricted. Even when you want to build your own home, there are specific rules that you have to adhere to in terms of the shape of the house, the colors, the roof.
You have the roof,
the materials.
You have the material.
Yes, so it's not, and the French are kind of reserved. I would say from my personal experience, if I compare the Germans and the French, the housing system in France is reserved. They're not stylistic, they're not, all that out there. When you go to Germany, on the other hand, you will see houses and you'll be like, oh my God, is this a house? Like, you'll see those kinds of houses in Germany. For healthcare, for me, I think it's a good and a bad thing because the good part is that the healthcare is developed. We have some kind of medications and technology that is not there in other countries, like maybe other developed countries. However, there are very many restrictions here. For example, you cannot walk into a pharmacy and buy any type of medicine the way we do in Kenya. That's a good thing, and it's also a bad thing depending on how you look at it, because we have some antibiotics that you cannot buy in the pharmacy unless you get a prescription from the doctor. And of course, to get this prescription, you have to pay the doctor. The doctor has to examine you and say, okay, give them a flu antibiotic. Like for example, if you have a flu, they'll never give you an antibiotic for flu. You'll always maybe have not Panadol, but painkillers, or people don't even go. Mostly you wouldn't go to the hospital if you have a flu. It is good because then you have a public insurance. When you go to the doctor and the doctor looks at you, you may pay the money, but you get reimbursed with your health care after a certain period of time. It's very important here to have a family doctor. Like in most cases, you just don't walk into, unless it's an emergency, you just don't walk into a hospital and you want them to treat you. In most cases, you are required to have a family doctor who knows your family history, knows your medical history, and who is registered with your medical card.
Yes.
So unlike other countries, like maybe in Kenya, you just decide who's the best doctor for treating this, you go. Who's the best doctor for treating that, you go. But here you must have a family doctor.
First, you go to this doctor, then this doctor will refer you to a specialist.
Exactly. So the bad things, the weather here is not as good as the weather back home for those people who come from countries that have warm weather. It depends with the season, of course. There's summer and there's winter. Winter can get really cold depending on the city.
Yeah.
Luckily here in Bordeaux it gets cold, but it doesn't get as cold as other countries or other places in France. When it's summer, it's good, but then it gets also very hot. Like at some point you cannot stay in the house unless you have a fan. You cannot, there's variation. There's really high and there's really low. Of course, you have to adjust to everything as it changes. You either have clothes for the cold weather, or you have a system to help you live in the very hot weather. For jobs, my friends, for me, to be honest with you, I think my experience has been bad so far, and simply because I think that France is an international country, and me coming into France, my thought initially was that it's a very open place in terms of whether you're an English speaker or a French speaker, you'll be able to get jobs readily. But when you get into France, you realize that if your French is not good, if it's A1, A2, or you cannot communicate the way you're communicating in your mother tongue, it will not be easy for you to get a job. And even if you have the basic French and then you want to get an English-speaking job, it's still tricky. The English-speaking jobs that are available here are mostly the casual jobs, like maybe babysitting or teaching English, or, we also have international companies that maybe do their jobs in English, but they are very few. And in most cases, you'll get such a job if you're coming from your country, if this company is taking you from your country to come here in France. So you might find that you've been learning all your life in English, you have certificates in English, you have your proficiency in English, but you get here in France and you have to do everything in France, or at least you have to learn the language, the French language, then work in that language. I also have friends who can speak very good French, but they still struggle with finding jobs, and they work mostly online jobs, mostly part-time jobs. They're not able to get like permanent contracts here in France. So I'll advise you, if you have a good job back home, if you have your family back home, if you're coming to France, don't come with the expectations of finding good jobs and finding good salaries. Come with an expectation of maybe expanding your circles, or just improving your social life, or learning the French culture, and everything else will fall in place with time.
Yeah.
So for schools, it depends with the kind of school you're coming to. If you're coming for primary school or high school, the education system here is free. Public schools are free.
Yes.
So as long as you're joining a public primary or secondary school, it's free. If you're joining university, it is not free. It depends on what you're joining to do. If it's master's, if it's PhD, there are scholarships that can pay for you. Otherwise, you have to pay for yourself the fees.
Yes.
And but although I think it's much cheaper.
Yeah, it's much cheaper.
Yeah, it's standardized compared to other countries, like maybe in Kenya, it's standardized. It's not as expensive as in those countries. Apart from PhD, I know PhD is really expensive, and master's is also expensive. But like if you're coming to university, it's cheaper than in those other countries. In terms of studying your language here in France, it is expensive. It is very expensive. Like if you're coming to Alliance Française or any private school to study your language, it is expensive. Like for only 3 months, you'll have to pay almost
€2,000.
Yes, 2,000 euros or more than 1,000 euros, which is 100,000 Kenyan shillings, just to study a language. So maybe you may opt to do it online, or you may opt to do it at home and then go do the exams. But to be honest, schooling here in terms of private schools and studying French in France is expensive if you're sponsoring yourself. Maybe if you're able to learn it in your own country before you come, it's an added advantage. Yes, so I think that's what we had to share with you in terms of my experience. If you have anything that you think I have missed out and you'd like to ask me, please write it down in the comments, and I'll be sure to respond to you and tell you my thoughts and my experience. Today's shout out goes to Beryl Williams. She's the one who requested for this information, plus many others. So thank you so much, Beryl, for watching, and I hope that this was helpful. And to every other person who watches, keep tuning in, because the shout out, your shout out, is coming up soon.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So bye bye, see you in the next one.